We're continuing our discussion of the Town of Hingham water acquisition. And joining us is Board of Selectman Mary Power. Welcome, Mary.
Thank you for having me.
Let's get right to the questions. And why did the town initiate the feasibility study?
Back in 2012, the town and the Board of Selectmen at the time had a lot of concerns about the management and the maintenance of our water system. Despite the fact that our water rates were the 5th highest in the state, the owners of the water company had adopted what we refer to as a break and fix strategy for water mains. That wasn't working for the town. The town had instituted a road building plan, and unlike National Grid, the water company was not partnering with the town, and that lack of coordination was creating disruption, and it was costly to the ratepayers and taxpayers in the town. We had seen 3 ownership changes in 15 years, and our water company moved from kind of having that feel of a locally owned and operated water company to now being part of a multinational corporation. And in that transition, we understood that a multinational corporation's first obligation is to its shareholders. And I think what we started to see is that the needs of the shareholders and the needs of the ratepayers and the customers in the water system weren't necessarily aligned. Town leadership at the time tried to address a number of these issues with the water company, and they weren't really being resolved to our satisfaction. The town wasn't feeling listened to. The town had lost confidence in the water company's owners' ability to manage and operate the system in the way that was best for its customers.
Why did it take 7 years for this study to come to this point?
Well, you know, in Hingham, we like to study things. And I think that's one of the hallmarks, and that's one of the reasons that we're a AAA bond rated community from all 3 rating agencies, only one of a handful. But the primary reason that this took 7 years of study is because we had to enter into litigation to determine the purchase price of the system. Back in 1879, when the water company was formed, the statute allowed the residents of Hingham at any time to purchase the water company. And the statute defined how that purchase price would be determined. But back in 1879, we didn't have a lot of accounting methods like depreciation. You didn't have things financed with debt, so it was tougher than just picking up the statute and doing a quick calculation. The town had to enter into litigation, and that took about 4 years. And, you know, the litigators tell us that that was actually pretty quick. But during that period of litigation, we thought that it was a good idea to pause on a lot of our work until we knew that that purchase price made it financially appealing to the town.
Mary, how much will it cost to purchase the water company?
Approximately $108 million.
And will that price change over time?
Yes, it will. According to the statute and the ruling by the court, the purchase price increases by about $3 to $4 million a year. And we think that's something that people should keep in mind as they come to town meeting. 5 years from now, the purchase price could be $15 to $20 million higher than it is today.
Who will pay for the water company?
The ratepayers. This is not going to increase taxes. The cost to purchase the water company will be part of water rates. As John and Ed have already talked about, under town ownership, about 50% of the costs that we pay for right now would go away without affecting service. So instead of paying for shareholder profit or rent that Aquarian charges to itself, those dollars would pay for the debt service associated with purchasing the water company. And after 30 years, as they've told you, when the mortgage is paid off, those costs will go away.
And the ratepayer, is that consistent as it applies to the town of Hingham, the town of Hull, and the ratepayers in North Cohasset?
That's correct. There will be one water rate for all customers. There will not be any differentiation by geography. I don't even think we're allowed to do that, even if we wanted to. What we've essentially said under town ownership is that we understand that our responsibility is going to be to service all 13,000 ratepayers that are part of this service area. And those are some of our neighbors in Hull and some of our neighbors in Cohasset. We will run the entire system. We will treat all ratepayers the same. We will prioritize capital improvements based on priority, not on geography.
Mary, will purchasing the water company affect property taxes?
Purchasing the water company will not affect property taxes. And again, that's because the cost of purchasing the water company will be part of our water rates. Your water bill in the next year will remain the same. It will just pay for different things.
I see. And how about the bond rating, the town's bond rating? Will purchasing the water company affect the town's bond rating?
You know, I'm glad you asked about that, because that's obviously something that is a very important consideration in the town. Hingham enjoys a AAA bond rating from all three rating agencies. That's a reflection of the quality of our management, and it's also very helpful because it affords us access to the markets, and we enjoy some of the lowest borrowing rates that anybody can get. Over the last year, we've had extensive conversations with our town financial advisors, and in fact, all three of the credit rating agencies. They have been fully aware of the possibility that we might purchase the water company. We've talked to them about our plans. We've talked to them about how we would operate it. We've shared our financial information. And we did that because we wanted to understand whether there was going to be any risk to our credit rating. That's very important to the town. And what we've consistently heard from the rating agencies and our financial advisors is that because the water company revenues will pay for all of the costs of the water company, it's what we call self-supporting. And for that reason, the credit rating agencies have kind of told us two things. First of all, it won't count against our debt limit, so it won't affect our ability to borrow for other important municipal projects. And secondly, what they've also told us is that because of the self-supporting nature, they don't see that it will have an impact on our credit rating. You know, as a member of the Board of Selectmen and someone who's been very involved in studying this for a long time, as a member of the Board of Selectmen, our job has different facets to it. And one of the things that we have to make sure of is that a decision we make in one aspect of the town doesn't have a detrimental impact somewhere else. And certainly, as we look at financial expenditures and something like purchasing the water company, we're looking really carefully to understand if there are any adverse consequences anywhere else in the town. And after 7 years of careful study and careful consideration, and really challenging ourselves to say, does this make sense for the town? Will it help the town? Could it hurt the town? Our conclusion time and time again is that this is a beneficial step for the town to take. And that's really the reason that we're looking at this. We feel a tremendous responsibility to our citizens of the town, and we think that this is a positive step now and for the future.
So given that the water utility would be self-supporting, it does then suggest that other needs that we have in the town, such as perhaps building out our senior center, we can look forward to that becoming a reality in the short term.
Absolutely. As a member of the Board of Selectmen, if I had learned that purchasing the water company would interfere with a senior center or foster school or fire stations, that would have been a showstopper for me. And again, we've had a lot of discussions with the external market, and that's not the case. I'd add one more thing, Joe, and I mentioned earlier that our water rates were the 5th highest in the state in 2012. I think today they're about 23% higher than the Massachusetts average. You know, when you think about living in Hingham, there are certain costs that you have. You have to pay your property taxes. You have to have electricity, and we're so fortunate to have Hingham Light. And you have to have water. And your only choice for water is the water company. And when I think about, and when I hear from people about living in Hingham, one thing we hear particularly from a lot of our seniors is that it's getting more expensive to live in Hingham. And part of the appeal of purchasing the water company to me is that we will have lower and slower water rate increases. So if you're looking at your household budget, if your water bill goes up by 12%, which it did a couple of months ago, those are dollars that you have to spend. You don't have a choice. But those are dollars that you don't have available for other things. So one of the reasons that we think purchasing the water company makes sense is that we think it's going to help our ratepayers' wallets. And indirectly, I think that's going to help us as we think about how we're going to pay for some of those other big projects down the road.
Mary, water is a precious resource. And I've just discovered this term, unaccounted for water. What is that, and why is that important in this discussion?
So every community is regulated by the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection, the DEP. And the DEP sets withdrawal limits for every community in the Commonwealth about how much water we can withdraw from the aquifer. And that's because they have the responsibility for the care and custody of our water supply. So in Hingham, we have a water withdrawal limit. And one of the reasons why, for example, there are irrigation restrictions is because we have to make sure that we don't exceed that withdrawal limit. Unaccounted for water is water that is withdrawn from the aquifer, but that doesn't make its way into our faucets and our showers in our houses. And there are a lot of reasons for unaccounted for water. One of the reasons is if you have leakage in pipes. We have a very old system. It hasn't been well taken care of. There's a lot of water that's getting withdrawn from the aquifer and that's leaking back into the ground, not available for consumption. It also means that we're putting greater strain on our watershed. And in fact, the unaccounted for water standard in the state is 10%. So 1 out of every 10 gallons is lost. In 2012, our unaccounted for water was 24%. And that equated to nearly the capacity of Accord Pond. And that's a lot of water. So, it's water that perhaps we don't have to withdraw from the stressed watershed, or it's water that's available for consumption. And I think for the town, it reinforced our contention that our water system wasn't being properly managed. And I think our frustration in not having a voice in those decisions was something that compelled the town to take the study, to start the feasibility study. Now, in fairness, I would point out that over the last 7 years, the unaccounted for water has been reduced. Last year, which is the last reporting period to the DEP, it's down to 16%. I think a lot of that is because of the visibility that the town has placed on this issue as we've been looking at purchasing the water company. I think it's important that we sustain the improvements we've had and try to get down to the state average, below the state average, which is 10%.
Staying on unaccounted for water, is there a recent acquisition by a local municipality?
Hyannis acquired their water system in the early 2000s. And, they did a lot of the things that we're talking about doing if Hingham were to own and operate its water system. And one of the things that was very significant to us is that in Hyannis, they have been able to improve their unaccounted for water, where today it is 6%. Now, that's a full 4 percentage points below the Massachusetts standard. And so we see possibilities under town ownership of not only hitting that Massachusetts standard, but beating it.
Why should Hingham buy its water company?
You know, it's interesting. Last night, the advisory committee held its hearing. They voted 11-2 in favor of purchase. And I was struck by the responses to that question that every member gave around the table. And everybody said a little bit something different. And I think there are a lot of potential benefits to the town owning its water system. For me, the biggest part of it is that it allows us to control our destiny, which I think has been a real hallmark of this town for so many years. Back in the late 1800s, Hingham purchased its light company. I would hold HMLP up against any electric utility in the entire United States. Hingham has, we operate our own ambulance service, and we do that very well, and we understand the responsibility that goes along with that. Several years ago, Hingham purchased the Lincoln School Apartments and said, we want to provide housing for seniors who want to stay in this town and don't have a lot of options for housing. And we've done that very well, and we understand our responsibility in that. To me, purchasing the water company is very much along the lines of controlling our destiny, giving us the ability to control the decisions related to the daily management of a really precious resource. Water is an important resource. It's going to be more important in the future. And under town ownership, all of the decisions will be filtered through the lens of what's best for the ratepayers. We won't have to worry about the shareholders. We won't have to worry about the board meetings. We're gonna focus on the ratepayers. And I'd add one other piece to that, which is that as Hingham would operate this water system, it would all be done locally in full view of the public. And I think that's a really good thing. I think that for the public to be able to participate in the decisions made relative to the management of their water system is a really important thing.
Mary, is there anything else you'd like to add to this discussion?
Thank you for asking. On April 22nd, town meeting is going to have an opportunity to make this very important decision. Town volunteers, town staff, we've been working very hard for the last 7 years to give the voters of Hingham the information they need to make a choice. This decision requires a 2/3 majority vote at town meeting, and that's a very high hurdle. And it's an important decision, so there should be a high hurdle to it. No matter how good the work is, no matter how good the analysis is, whether it makes sense to do, what really matters is who comes to town meeting. And I don't think that this is a decision this to me is a generational decision. I view it as the most consequential decision that I will ever make in the time I've lived in this community. And I think people need to be part of the process. We can't rely on people showing up to vote. If we think this is a good idea, we need to make the time, we need to attend the meeting, we need to listen to the discussion, and we need to vote. As a member of the League of Women Voters, I'm often reminded of the phrase that democracy is not a spectator sport. And I would just ask all of the residents of Hingham to think about Tuesday, April 23rd, when this decision will have been made. Will you feel good about the decision? Will you regret the decision? And I would just urge everybody to come to town meeting and please to be part of the process. We can do all the work, but the decision rests in the hands of the Hingham voters where it should. So I hope to see everybody at town meeting on Monday, April 22nd at 7 o'clock at Hingham High School.
Well, I'm looking forward to sitting down with Karen Johnson, Selectman Karen Johnson when we talk about governance. And I want to thank you, Mary, for taking the time with us today to discuss the background, the impact on our town finances, and of course our bond rating as well. Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you for having me.